I was surprised by the number of people who said to me, well, your travel is over now. And I was like, why does it have to be that way? Why do we have to view our lives as kind of stopping when we have kids and not being able to still pursue what we love and involve our children as part of that and become part of our dreams? So from the get-go, we were like, well, we're still going to travel with our kids, which is what we did.
So that's Caroline from the Why Travel blog. And along with her husband Craig and their 2 children, the Makepeace family have been traveling on and off with their kids for over 13 years. And during this time, they've managed to visit over 52 countries and live in 5 of them. They've also had the unique perspective of traveling with their girls at different stages of their lives. And because of that, they've experienced the highs, the lows, and everything in between of traveling as a family that we can all learn from. Some of the areas we cover off today, the challenges and rewards to traveling with children at different stages of their lives, how the Makepeace family handles education while on the road, how travel has helped shape their 2 girls as they grow into young adults. Hopefully you will enjoy this chat because I certainly did. And if you want to learn more about the Makepeace family and the Why Travel blog, I'll leave their details in the description and the comments. Let's get into it. Okay, Caroline, can you tell everyone a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I'm Australian, but I do live in Raleigh, North Carolina. I've been traveling since I was 21. In 1997, I moved over to London and did the working holiday over there for 2 years and just fell in love with travel. And so I've been determined ever since then to make travel the focus of my life. So that's what I've pretty much been doing, living around the world. And in 2010, we started our travel blog, and that grew and had great success from that. And because of that, we got a green card. So we were able to come and live in the US full time, which is, we've been here for the past, since 2017, and we have 2 daughters. So we've done a lot of our travels with them.
Awesome. That's amazing. So can you give us a bit of a quick snapshot of your life before you embarked on this travel journey? So what you mentioned that you've got a bit of wanderlust and you've been doing a lot of traveling. What did your life look like before traveling, and how did you meet Craig?
So I started traveling when I was 21. So really before that, I hadn't had too much of a life outside of school and university. And so really I started traveling when I was an adult. So it's kind of the only life as an adult that I know and can remember really. But Craig and I are from the same small town in Australia, and I knew him growing up through mutual friends. He also used to play professional rugby league for North Sydney Bears, so it was hard really, it is from a small town, not to know who he was. And then after I was overseas for nearly 3 years, I came back and just kept running into Craig everywhere. And he really wanted to travel because he had retired from football at that stage. And I was definitely keen to go again. So that's how we kind of met actually and got together, was just kind of through travel, funny enough. And then after we got married, we left straight away and ended up traveling for about 5 years. So technically we had a 5-year honeymoon.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
It's amazing how travel does bring people closer together. Because you really have to have a similar mindset and a similar thought process to make it work long term. And 5 years is a long time to be traveling, together on a honeymoon, experiencing the highs and lows of not only traveling, but marriage.
Yeah, yes, I know. It's like one way to see if you're going to make it, I suppose.
Exactly. So you mentioned that traveling's always been a core of your life and Craig's life, obviously. How did that dynamic change with the introduction of kids into the mix, and becoming a family and traveling as a family?
Yeah, well, as I said, I was determined to always make travel part of my life. And when I fell pregnant with my eldest, Kalara, she's now almost 16 in a week, I was surprised by the number of people who said to me, well, your travel is over now. And I was like, why does it have to be that way? Why do we have to view our lives as kind of stopping when we have kids and not being able to still pursue what we love and involve our children as part of that and become part of our dreams? So from the get-go, we were like, well, we're still going to travel with our kids, which is what we did, traveling with them since they were born. We have Kalira's 16 and Savannah's 4 years younger than her. And we started off just doing sort of small trips with them in and out in different places. And then when they were 6 and 2, we left what ended up being an 18-month road trip around Australia. So obviously travel changes a lot once you have kids. You have to adapt it. But our belief is that you can make travel work no matter what your lifestyle, because your life is always changing. How I traveled as a solo backpacker is so different to how I travel now. And so we just had to go slower, and there obviously were, as each stage of the children got older, there were different things we could do. Like at the beginning, we weren't really hiking or anything, but as their ages, as they got older and they could handle that, then we would do more hikes and more adventurous kind of stuff.
And do you feel like you guys had a lot of obviously experience traveling as backpackers and as a couple? Do you feel that traveling as a family is being better or worse or different?
Just different. It's hard to say if it's better or worse, because it's just there's so many parts of it that are just so rewarding, but there are so many parts of it that's challenging at the same time. There are days where I'm like, oh gosh, I wish I was just this backpacker again that could roam around without any responsibilities. But that'll come when I'm an empty nester now, I think.
Yeah, and it's also too, I found, obviously our kids are a little bit younger, but I found that one of the best perks of having children when you're traveling is a couple of things. Firstly, being able to skip queues at the airport, especially if they're young, because they want to let you know, it's like we flew into Vietnam, that's where we are at the moment, and we're at the terminal, and it was 11 o'clock at night, and they just ushered us through the diplomat area because the kids were looking tired, so that was a perk. And the other perk that we found traveling with kids over when we were backpacking is just doing fun stuff. You do a lot more fun stuff with kids because you need to keep them entertained. So, theme parks and like adventurous stuff that you wouldn't necessarily feel comfortable doing as backpackers. It's like, yeah, we're with our kids. We can go to a theme park and it's not awkward at all.
Yes, that's so true. You are definitely looking at the world in a different way, and it's always, well, how can I make this more fun, and how can I engage, make sure the kids aren't bored, because a bored child is not a fun child.
Yeah. So of all the countries that you guys have traveled to as a family, so obviously this podcast is really about family, so we're going to put a focus on that because I believe you guys have got a wealth of experience there. Are there any moments that really deeply resonated with you guys as a family and shaped how you view travel as a family?
There were so many. I think our Australian road trip, really, even though Australia is my own country, I hadn't explored it before. And it was our first time really embarking on an adventure together. So it was figuring out how we could make this lifestyle a reality. And it was really, I think, through that experience, we did become more adventurous as a family, and we found a whole new world of activities that we love to do together. A lot of hiking, adventure, kayaking, and just kind of really, in Australia so much, I didn't really need to explore the culture too much in Australia. It doesn't differ a lot. But, there was different cultural aspects we could explore, but it was really just this connecting to nature and understanding how that impacts all of us in such a positive way. And so our travels from then on have always been about nature. However, now our children are 16 and 12. They're really sick to death of hiking. So now we're doing more European stuff. And so, now exploring Europe with them at their age is a whole new adventure again and a whole new experience, because at their age now, they're more able to sort of, there's so much history there, they're more able to understand it and connect to it. So I think that Australian trip really shaped us in so many ways. But again, you have to be so flexible because everything will change because your children will change so much. So you have to be flexible to sort of always be changing the pathway and mixing it up and saying, well, that worked then, but not so much now. This is what's going to work this time. But you can always find a different way to make it work.
That's absolutely amazing. I speak to a lot of different families who are thinking of doing all kinds of different trips, big laps around Australia, sailing, and a lot of the families that do big laps, they tend to sort of stop once they've done it. So they do the big lap, they might travel around Australia, but they don't generally go past Australia. They might travel, a few places, but not not like going from Australia and then continuing on their travel. So what was the thought process? So you've done your lap, you're traveling around Australia, then how do you go from doing that to traveling around the world?
Yeah, so I guess a lot of our motivation or our drive for continuing to do it is that we do have a business around it now. So, travel is our lifestyle, and the way we earn money. So we have to keep doing it. But we were just kind of like, okay, so we've done the big lap around Australia. For us, it was always a matter of what's next. There was never an end point. We just never had that thinking ever. And so we were just, okay, what's next? What do we think would suit our family and our goals? And we always wanted to come back to the US. We had lived here. Craig and I had lived here before kids, and then we lived here when our eldest was 9 months old. And we always wanted to return here. So our thinking was, how can we get back there? And so in the meantime, we stopped the Australian lap for about 18 months, and we lived in Queensland. And so our focus was always travel. So we did a lot of travel still then. Like, we did a lot of trips in Australia. We went to the Philippines, Thailand, Singapore, so a lot of Southeast Asia, New Zealand. It was just a matter of, okay, in this time of our life, while we figure out the next chapter, we're just going to do short-term trips coming in and out. And we could do that with the girls. It was easy back then because they were younger, so school wasn't such an issue. We could come and go as we liked, pretty much. And then when we had to wait till we got a O1 visa to come back to the US, then once we got that, it was like, okay, so now we plan for the next chapter, which was living in the US, traveling around the US. And then, well, we actually didn't travel for 5 years. When we relocated here, part of our visa requirement was that we would promote the USA as a destination around the world. So we did an 11-month RV trip of the US, and just lots of travel within the US. And then obviously COVID happened, so that shut us down from leaving the country for a couple of years. So that was kind of the next thing for us, was how could we get back to the US? And in that meantime, we were able to launch our O1 visa into a green card. And so now the next phase of our life is, our girls are in school now. So this phase is short trips again, but mostly Europe, focus on Europe, because it's so much easier to get to Europe from the US than Australia.
Yes, yeah, of course. And I see that a lot here. Obviously, we've met a lot of families along the way here in Asia, and the efforts and the efforts that people have to go to get from the US to Southeast Asia.
Yes.
I can understand why they travel to Europe and the Caribbean and places like that, because it's the same. It's the same as us trying to get to Europe, Yeah. So no, that makes a lot of sense. And but I've got a question here, and it's about challenges. All families face challenges when they're traveling, and what I've found is every family handles them differently. And obviously, no doubt, you're no exception to that. I'm sure you guys have had challenges along the way. And extended family travel, it presents unique challenges, right? And can you discuss some particularly challenging times that you faced and how you guys have navigated it together as a family?
Gosh, there's so many. And again, it's so specific to their age, because the challenges we experience now with teenagers are so different to when we first started, when they were just toddlers. And I think at the beginning of our Australian road trip, we were doing this full time for the first time. Our daughter, our youngest, was 2. And so she's still in diapers. She still had a dummy, what Americans would call pacifiers. And she had been sleeping in her cot. So we went straight from there to, basically, we lived in a tent for 3 months, because at that time, that was all we could afford. And we were determined to do this trip. So I was like, okay, we're going to be living in a tent. So we lived in a tent for 3 months. So we went from that situation to her being suddenly free out of the cot, and living in this tent. And it was extremely difficult. And then we had to move through potty training her and weaning her off the pacifier. And she is our challenging child, our second child.
The free spirit.
Oh my gosh. And so that was extremely difficult. It was very challenging. And I do think the toddler years are the most difficult time to travel with kids because they are just finding their legs and they're going through these huge changes. And so to manage that while you're also traveling on the road and moving every couple of days, and we were working also online at the same time. So it was very, very challenging. And then after 3 months, we were like, okay, this is not working. And at that stage, we were able to get a loan to buy a very small pop-up travel trailer camper caravan. I get confused with what country calls things what now after living in 2 different countries, but I think it was just a Jayco pop-up thing. And so then we were able to move into that, which made things easier. So it's just kind of like trying to figure out, well, how can we sort of manage and change things slightly and make things work to whatever challenge is arriving. And then, you know, after that, we had trying to manage schooling on top of traveling full-time, which I know is a big issue for many families who are thinking about doing this. And they're worried about, well, what's going to happen to my child's education? And I was a school teacher, so I felt a lot more comfortable in taking care of the kids' education, but it's still challenging fitting it in to your busy travel schedules. And one thing I had to do was a bit of letting go of my beliefs around teaching, in that it needed to be so structured in order for kids to learn. And it just wasn't working for us. So I ended up slipping into more of an unschooling and just letting the travel teach our kids. And somehow or another, my youngest child taught herself how to read. So it was just like this eye-opening thing for me, just to see that kids will learn and grow so much just by being with you and having these incredible experiences and learning from life and through the travel.
That's absolutely amazing. Again, yeah, you're right. Like schooling, of all the things that parents talk to us about as an issue, schooling is the one. And I mean, to be fair, it was the biggest issue for us too. And it's interesting to hear a teacher's perspective because obviously there's a lot of different camps when it comes to traveling with kids. And, you know, you have a unique perspective because you do know traditional schooling and the value of that as well. Yet you chose to do the unschooling, or as you sort of mentioned a lot, life schooling, you know, doing life schooling. So obviously you talk to a lot of families as well, you know, with your blog's quite well known in the space. And what are some common misconceptions that you hear from people that when you hear it, you go, I hear this all the time and it's just not true, you know? What are some of those misconceptions that you hear often?
They say that they'll say that it's too hard. And my response to that is parenting is hard. Like it's not that when you go and travel with your kids that it gets any harder. It's parenting is hard, full stop. Doesn't matter what you're doing. And I actually, for me, my thinking was, okay, when I'm at home parenting, my insanity level feels a lot higher. I feel a lot more stressed out because there is no outlet and you're so stuck in the routines and the schedules and the running around here, there and there. There's no time for fun. And that's a stress level that's not really there when you go and travel with your kids. The parenting is still hard, but now you're taking the hardness of parenting onto the road and you're having a lot of fun in between. So instead of running around and all of that in between, you're actually having fun. You're going on these great adventures and you start to see the benefits that your kids are gaining from it and that you are a family are gaining from it. So I think a lot of parents have in their head, in their head, they have the framework of travel from the perspective of how they traveled before they were parents. You can't think like that. It's different now. It's a totally different experience. So just think of it, okay, that was my previous life. Now I'm going to approach travel from a different perspective as a way for our family to come together and bond and have these amazing experiences and to help my children grow into these beautiful human beings. I think travel is just this amazing portal for growth. And I think kids benefit from it so much. So I think if you frame it from that perspective, it won't seem so hard anymore.
Yeah, I think that you hit the nail on the head. There's a lot of parents out there that traveled as a kid in the back of a station wagon, camped in the side of the road, and there was no internet, no entertainment except each other. There's so much information out there that makes traveling so much easier for everyone, and to make sure that you have the right experiences as a family. Okay, so you mentioned a lot about. So obviously, for those who don't know, Caroline and Craig have a really awesome blog called the Why Travel Blog, and it's been around for a long time, and it's really a resource for a lot of families out there who are thinking of traveling and things like that. And you mentioned life schooling a lot, and we touched on it earlier. Can you explain a little bit about what life schooling is and how you feel like it's been an enriching experience for your kids in your travels?
Sure. So life schooling is kind of like stepping away from traditional schooling where you're sitting down and spending 40 minutes on math, 40 minutes on reading, etc. And you're just learning from life. So you're just offering children the opportunity to learn from the experiences around them and to pursue what they're interested in. Pretty much that's what it is. So it's a very flexible, child-centered approach to learning. And I feel you can easily give your children these kind of experiences that they can learn from when they're traveling. And it's done in such a fun and engaging way that the kids don't even know they're learning. They're just absorbing the world around them. So you think about, the lessons from school that you learnt, say geography. I mean, how difficult it was to connect to the vocab, all those things you learnt about geography in school, where when a child's out traveling, they're in the different geographical areas. Like we spent nine months in the Australian outback. So my children have got it, right? They understand the outback. They've lived and breathed it. They've seen the flora and fauna. They don't need to study that from a book. One thing that stuck out at me actually, just at how rigid and kind of impractical the education system can be. When we first went on our Australian road trip, my daughter was distance education because in Australia, the law, like it's really easy to homeschool in the US, but in Australia, it was quite challenging. And if you're going to homeschool, you had to actually have a home and they came and checked. So we actually had to do distance education. And there was we're traveling around the country, and there was one unit of work my daughter had to do on car safety. And she had to do all these lessons on wearing a seatbelt and how you wear a seatbelt. And I just wrote back and said, I'm not doing this.
Yeah, she's worn more seatbelts than most kids have worn in their life.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not doing this lesson. So that's just an example of how much time is wasted on life skills in school, which is totally unnecessary. Like if you go on a road trip around the country with your children, they're going to have to put on the seatbelt thing linked. So that's kind of the thing about life schooling. You don't have to do any formal lessons. You just live life and learn.
And it sounds like from what you're saying that that travel lends itself really well to that unschooling, life schooling type scenario because of the diversity of experiences that a kid gets when they travel and, the challenges they face, like our boys at the moment, we're in Vietnam. And so like every dollar is 15,000 dong. So, they're trying to calculate 15,000 times everything. And it's amazing how quickly they pick things up when they have a practical use case from a mathematics perspective. So it's super interesting to hear your perspective on that. So obviously there's a lot of parents out there that are going to watch this and go, okay, that's all good and well. I'd love that idea of that. But how do I go from traditional schooling or, where I am now to doing something like that? We want to go on a big lap, or we've decided we're going to go on a big trip and we want to do that. But I've only ever done traditional schooling. My partner's only done traditional schooling. So how do you go from unwinding all that kind of learning?
Yeah, it's very challenging. I would suggest do it in steps. I think the core things that you will want to focus on is reading and math. I really think, okay, I think math is, I don't know, surprising because my daughter taught herself so many things, even from math. And there are many essential math skills like map reading. And as you said, converting money, all of that kind of stuff you can do when you're on the road. But you might want to do some, and it depends on the age of your kids, of course, but some instruction on, actually long division or something, because that kind of stuff is kind of what they need to know, but they can't necessarily pick it up themselves. I would just focus on getting some programs, 1 or 2 programs, online program that your child can spend an hour, maybe 2. You wouldn't even need 2 hours really, an hour to say 1 to 2 hours a day, and fit it in whenever you can, and just get them to do those programs online. There are lots of like fun games and things that they can play and do online. So one program I really loved, which I do think helped my younger daughter with her reading, is Reading Eggs. It's an Australian reading program. Absolutely fantastic. Honestly, just get that. And then they have a math one too. The Reading Eggs has a math egg program. Yeah, those 2 and you're sweet. Like, it's going to change depending on your age. Like right now we have a child in the 11th grade. So I'm not going to be homeschooling with her because that's a different life stage. She needs to prepare for college, etc. But for younger kids, definitely. And then that's all I would worry about. Then the rest of your life, your social studies, your science, etc., just find activities as you're traveling that will cater to that. You can also visit a lot of like children's museums, science museums. And if your child's like suddenly they have an interest in dinosaurs, so then just really focus when you go to the science museum on going to the dinosaur section and just, learning about that. You can even go and visit dinosaur places around the world, that kind of stuff. So just focus on the reading and the math, but then the other stuff, just go and experience that through life.
That's such amazing advice. And if Reading Eggs ever listens to these podcasts, they'll realize that every single family seems to be using Reading Eggs. So I think they need to put a little bit more time and effort into the Trouble family side, because you're not the first person that's mentioned that. Pretty much every Trouble family I've spoken to is using Reading Eggs. So that's it's good everyone's on the same page. You brought up something there that was I sort of you hinted on, but was super interesting to me, and that is the fact that your girls are a little bit older now and they're in high school. I don't know what it's called in the US, but like junior college, high school. Yeah, they're in high school, right? They're in high school, and do you feel like, so you were in the US when they entered high school, right? So do you feel like you would have been? Do you feel like that was the best decision to make, or would you like what I'm sort of asking is like something we're going to face in a few years is our kids are going to be at high school age, and we're going to have a candid conversation of whether we continue to travel or whether we start to ground ourselves somewhere so they can build relationships and friendships and things. Do you feel like that's benefited them grounding yourself and basing yourself somewhere for high school?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we always knew that's what we were going to do. We always knew that once our eldest was of high school age, the focus had to change because it was going to be more about friendships, and not just friendships, I think at that age, because, high school is quite a transition period into adulthood. So I really wanted them to also have a lot of other adult influences by way of different teachers, any extracurricular things that they were doing. And I wanted them to be able to go into a classroom and have discussions about things with other students and have listen to a wide variety of opinions and insights, that kind of thing. So I knew that we could no longer offer them that. And so it was a big decision for us to settle down and put them into high school, and they wanted it. Our youngest is in what they call middle school here, so she's in 7th grade. So that's starting high school in Australia, but here it's middle. You go to middle school until the 9th grade, which is when you start high school. So our eldest is in the 11th grade, but they definitely wanted it. They both wanted to have that stability. They wanted those friendships, and they did want to go to traditional school.
Yeah. So something that gets brought up a lot, in the circles that we speak to, families that are traveling is socialization. That's obviously a big, it's a very polarizing topic, but it's one that gets brought up a lot. How have you found, obviously you guys have traveled for a long time with your kids, and how have you found that the traveling has shaped them as, young adults now? How do you feel it's shaped them as young adults? And was socialization an issue for you guys as you were traveling around and having your adventures?
It wasn't such a big issue, actually. We just met so many people on the road, and I think the nature of how we were traveling as well, doing the van life, so to speak, in Australia, is that you meet other people having the same experience. Like if you go to Southeast Asia maybe, or Europe, you have so many people that are just there on temporary holidays or vacations. They're in and out. It's hard to find that community. Whereas when you're in that van life, the community is kind of moving around in the same place and the same route. So you get to see them a lot. So when we traveled around Australia, we traveled with a family that we met on the road for about a month. And then after we finished with them, we traveled with another family we met for about 6 months. And then in the USA, we traveled with 2 families. So there was I think 11 kids. We all traveled together for 4 months. So it was like the socialization aspect wasn't ever really a problem. I just think it was so easy to sort of meet other travelers, other family travelers, and form those connections there. But how it's impacted them, I see it a lot. I don't necessarily think my children see the benefit yet, or they're probably not even aware, really. They're too young to be self-aware to notice that. But I can definitely see it, and I know, our job as parents, and it's hard. I'm speaking from the perspective now of a mother of a teenager, and teen years are very challenging. They're very, very challenging, just as much as toddler years. Sometimes I wish I would have said the toddler years instead of the teen. So sometimes, you hit the teenage years and you think everything I did was wrong. That's just I spoke to a lot of mothers of teens and they say the same thing. And so our job is to get our kids ready for adulthood. And I know 100%, I was speaking to a friend about this the other day, 100% certainty that the travel has helped prepare my kids for adulthood. And they're going through struggles at the moment just because they're teenagers. But I can really see there's a underlying level of strength, confidence, knowing what they want and being able to make a decision, and being very flexible and adaptable.
That's amazing.
And they have different personalities. Like my eldest daughter, she's very introverted and shy, whereas my youngest is the complete opposite. And so she has 1,000,001 friends because it's just so easy for her. It's just a personality thing, where it's a little bit more challenging for my daughter, given that she's introverted and shy. But I still see that strength and confidence that's there for both of them. They just bring it out in their own unique personality.
Absolutely amazing. I talk about this a lot on the podcast, about, part of the reason we started traveling, and it's mainly my reason. My wife had different reasons, but my reason is we grew up quite poor as a family. My mum's Filipino, and we had a lot of just hardships just through the virtue of that. What I found with our boys, because we had business and quite comfortable, there was no hardships that our boys were really facing outside of the superficial stuff that just pops up. And what I found with traveling is that it's a safe way of creating resilience in children, because they have to learn that there's more pressing issues than you having to carry your bag. If we're having to get on a plane, your concerns are secondary to us getting on that plane. And I found the boys have become really a lot more resilient since we've been traveling, because there's all these little stimulus that makes them uncomfortable, but not in a way that's going to make them upset, or permanently injured or anything. It's just more like, okay, well, you're going to have a bag on your lap when we're in this taxi because there's no room for the bag. So unless you don't want to have the bag anymore, you got to have to do it. So I find that artificial resilience in a safe environment is something I've definitely noticed, and the boys have changed a lot since we started traveling. Mm-hmm. But speaking of that, so I mean, you guys are fairly well traveled, and you've been to all different countries and all different places. How has your approach to safety and well-being as a family and as the kids have gotten older evolved over the years?
Yeah, that's a good question. And we have to consider an extra layer of that because we are on social media, and safety is something to consider. I'm not someone that worries too much. I don't put a lot of focus in freaking out about things. And I'm not to the extent that I'm just like, oh, everything's going to be fine, and not like trying to put things in place, because you do have to consider it. But I don't think it's helpful to be overly anxious about everything, because it's life. We're moving through life every single day, whether we're traveling or not. Life is not certain. So there are, things there. And I think we're much better able to handle whatever pops up in the moment if we are present and not stuck in the world of our heads. So I think that's a really important thing for people to remember, is get present, be focused now so you can deal with anything that does happen. But for us, we, especially given that we share things online, we make sure that we don't share where we are in the moment. So we're always delayed by a couple of days, because we don't want anyone to know exactly where we are and when. So that's something that we do. And now our girls are older, they have phones. So, that's one way that we can stay in connection, because they're older. They might want to, like, we were just in Europe in the summer, and sometimes they were tired after a day exploring. They didn't want to come out for dinner, so they stayed in the hotel. And Craig and I just went to a hotel around the corner, had dinner, and they were fine. So just different ways we can communicate in that way. What other sort of safety things were you thinking of? I just tend to go to that.
Yeah, just more like, obviously it's a different dynamic. You are very visible on the internet, so people get a feeling. They get to know you guys, and there's issues that come with that. But as I have two boys, and they're quite young, and I'm a big dude. I'm 6'2" and 100, and I'm like Craig. Like, I'm a big guy. So like, I feel like it's a different dynamic. So I'm asking this as a personal question, because I feel like it's a different dynamic when you have two young girls and young adults now. The dynamic is slightly different, because it's there's different risks and different risks that come with that than having two young boys. I feel like
yeah, there is, for sure. And we, like, our girls, our eldest especially, doesn't really want to be online or anything anymore. So we just don't put her on there. So I think it's just keeping pulse with them. And if they say, no, I don't want to do this, then, okay, yeah, sure, no problem, sort of thing. But with girls, I think it is a lot more challenging. And just, I often think sometimes if we're walking around the streets and that, just always having an eye on where they are, because sometimes they might be behind us, and then I'll stop and go, okay, you need to be in front. Like, I just need to see where they are at all times. Because, things can happen, and it is kind of, I try not to. I watched, that Liam Neeson.
Oh yeah, don't watch that.
Don't watch that. That was the worst thing I ever did.
And you would have been traveling. You would have been traveling when that came out too.
Oh, yeah. I can't remember where I was, but that was just horrendous. So I do have those discussions with my girls all the time. And, if they go walking somewhere, I sit them down. I'm like, okay, so that if someone comes up and says that your mummy told me to come and get you, and they go, I know, Mum, you would never send a stranger up and say...
Yeah, that's a great point. I'm actually going to do a video on safety, just on a few things that we've learned along the way, because... I think common sense prevails. Like the things that would apply whether you're at home back in Australia or the US or traveling, the same common sense rules apply. It's just you have to be a little bit more vigilant, but in a different way. But that's super interesting. It's, it sounds like common sense prevails, and it's more just, being attentive parents and, just not taking anything for granted. I'm more proud to you guys. I think, you have an amazing story. And I want to end on this question, and it's a question I ask everyone, because like I said, we have a lot of families that are watching this that are maybe still on the fence about going on a big trip or an extended vacation or whatever travel looks like to them. So what would you say to those people that are sort of on the fence? They've listened to this and they're on the fence about maybe going on a trip.
Oh, just do it. Honestly, you'll never regret travel. Never. There are some things, like you travel and some things might go wrong. It's a given. Just accept that it's not going to be perfect. It's probably not going to go as you scripted out, but it's going to be worth it and you'll never regret it. You'll never regret it because these are precious moments that you will have with your kids. Trust me, my eldest is now 16. In 2 years, she's going to be gone. And it's really hitting me that, oh my God, she's going to be gone in 2 years. And the number one thing that follows that thought is, thank God we spent so many years traveling with them. Because I really feel like I've lived a lifetime with my kids, and I don't think that many parents get to have that precious experience because they've chosen a different life, which is fine. It's what has suited them. But that comes at a sacrifice of losing so much precious time together. And so even if it means you just take 1-2 trips a year with your kids, do it, because you get to disconnect from the chaos that is the everyday life. You get to know your kids on a completely different level and just have these wonderful life-changing experiences, and those memories will be with you.
That's absolutely amazing. I talk about that a lot, that, you know, the reason we do the vlog is because when they're 14, 15, it's probably what you're experiencing right now. They want less to do with mum and dad. You're not their hero anymore.
Yes.
You don't have to cling on to them because you've got all these memories that you've created. You've filled your cup and you're like, yeah, well, I've had my good time with them. You know, I'm happy for them to go and be their own people now because I've got a lifetime, like you said, I've got a lifetime experiences I can go back on and look at. And I think that's a really, really good reason people should travel because, like you said, it goes, I imagine for you guys especially, it's gone very quick. Even though it hasn't, it's gone very quick.
Yes.
And you can't go back and get it once it's gone, right? The time. So I'm going to know this. Where can people find out more about your travels, your adventures? This is Raleigh. Where is that all kept?
Yes. Sure. So it's travelblog.com, and on all the socials, it's at travelblog. And the other site is thisisraleigh.com, and on Instagram, TikTok, etc., it's at this.
Awesome. And you recommend people come to Raleigh?
Yes. It's a great place.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being on, Caroline. And yes, and like I said, I'd love to have you on again to talk a little bit about the nuts and bolts of Why Travel blog if you get time.